my name is Shukri. Today I'm going to have an interview with my friend Aliyah, who is from the United States. And so let's welcome Aliyah. So can you give me a brief introduction about yourself?
Sure. Well, I'm from the United States. I've been in China about 6.5 years. Most of that time has been here in Wenzhou. And I'm a teacher. I've been an English teacher for more than 8 years now. So that's what I do here.
Okay. So today we are going to talk about, as my friend Aliyah, who has been living in China for a couple years, today we are going to talk about what does she think about China. So I will have some questions. He will answer my questions one by one. And first, Aliyah, first question, what do you motivated you to come to China?
Well, I really had no idea of what life in China was like. I just thought I wanted to come here to experience Asia. And as I said, I'm an English teacher. I taught in Turkey for 2 years before coming here. And there's a huge demand for English teachers in China. So I felt like this was the best place to come and be a teacher for a while.
So apart from Turkey, what other countries have you been to?
Well, I've lived and worked in Turkey and China, but strictly for tourism, I've been to Canada, the Bahamas, Guatemala, Peru, Egypt, India, Malaysia, Cambodia, Thailand, and the Philippines.
So why do you finally settle down and live in China?
Well, I've been in China, like I said, I've settled in China. I've been in China for 6 years. And to be honest with you, I wasn't planning on staying more than 1 year. But every year there was just another reason to come back. Overall, I would say China is probably one of the best places in the world to be a teacher.
Yeah. So why do you think China is the best place to live? So what points of China attracted you to live here?
Well, I was mostly attracted by the job security, as I said. It's the best place one of the best places in the world to be a teacher. Chinese people, they place a huge value on education. And also you get treated with generally more respect as a teacher. Yeah. The parents of your students, if you're teaching children, often your parents will be much more supportive of you as their child's teacher. And it's one of the best places to earn an income as a teacher. I once saw a video about teachers from Oklahoma in America who resigned from their jobs en masse. There were a bunch of them who tried to protest and demonstrate for better benefits, such as more resources, higher salary, more security, but their demands were not met. So a bunch of them resigned, and in a video they talked about what they were going to do instead. And there was at least one teacher from Oklahoma who said she was going to go be a teacher in China instead, because she would get better money. She would get paid, about the same, but the cost of living in China is about a third of what it is in America. So she would have a lot more financial security here.
Yeah, that's true. My next question is, what do you think is the biggest difference between the United States and China?
Yeah, that's a good question. As I mentioned, I lived in Turkey for 2 years before coming to China. And if you had asked me 10 years ago which country I thought would have been the bigger adjustment, Turkey or China, I would have assumed Turkey, but it was, without question, it was China. China was the much greater culture shock for me. So for one thing, you are deaf and blind to the world. Unless you learn Chinese before, you can't understand anyone and you can't read anything either. And that was much harder to deal with than I expected, honestly. But the language barrier aside, there were other differences. such as travel. Travel within China is a bit different. The train system is much more developed than it is in America. To give you an example, I've taken Amtrak a few times. Amtrak is the train system in America, and I researched the option of a sleeper car, which is a train car where you can actually lie down in a bed instead of sitting in a chair. And without exception, a sleeper car on Amtrak was more expensive than a plane ticket.
Yeah.
And much, much slower. So there was no logical reason to buy a sleeper car in America unless you were like terrified of flying in a plane or something.
Yeah.
But in China, a sleeper car is of course more expensive than just a chair or a seat on the train. But at the end of the day, it's still more cost efficient than taking the plane.
Yeah.
So that was something. I've ridden the train a lot more in China than I ever would have in America. And another thing that was a challenge for me is the preoccupation that a lot of Chinese people have with what they call saving face. That's a big thing in China, saving face.
Yeah.
They're really concerned with how they look to other people. And I think that's tied into the fact that in China, or frankly in East Asian culture more generally, you are born connected to other people. You are born tied into your family, tied into your community, tied into your neighborhood. You are born connected, and connections are a lot more important in China than they are in America.
Yeah.
And as a result of growing up in a place where connections are really, really important, you're much more concerned with how you look to other people. And that was difficult for me because even by American standards.
I tell you the reasons because, Western country is a country where you are emphasize importance individualism. But in China, we are kind of a country where we emphasize on collectivism. So probably, for Chinese parents, probably they will give money to their parents for their university tuitions. They will offer money to their parents, to their children to buy some houses, flats for marriage use. So I think the parents is doing much more greater financially compared to American parents. So which means if you use the money from the parents, that also means you have also more obligation, responsibility to be your parents. So this is what I think.
Yeah, that's another good point. Because also Chinese people are very concerned about making money. They will tell you, they will often admit that they love money.
Yeah.
Then they spend a lot of time at work. They're always looking for a better paying job. And it's easy enough for me, from a Western perspective, to judge them for that, to say, oh, you're so greedy, you're so miserly.
Yeah.
But part of, I think, that is like you said, there is an obligation to take care of your family, not just yourself.
Yeah.
You're supposed to, of course, take care of your kids, but also expected to take care of your parents when they get old.
Yeah.
So it's partly a sense of obligation to your connections, mostly to your family, that you feel like you have to get a lot of money because you have to take care of other people.
Yeah. So personally for me, I have been to a lot of foreign countries like the United States, Mexico, Iran, Russia, and Japan. So what impressed me most, I think China is a very safe country in terms of committing crime, in terms of personal security, especially when you walking in the street at midnight. There's no problem in China. But in Western countries, in Mexico, I don't dare to work outside after, for example, 8 p.m. or 9 p.m. So what do you think about security in China?
Yes, that is also a big difference between America and China, especially. I mean, crime does occur in China. I actually had my wallet stolen in Shanghai on the subway. I was just walking around, and I suddenly realized someone had pickpocketed the power bank and about 300 RMB out of my backpack, and. Yeah. I told a friend of mine here in China that had happened, and he said, "Oh, it must have been the subway," because apparently Shanghai subway just has a reputation for that. But like you said, violent crime in particular, is practically non-existent here. Yeah. And that's for a lot of reasons. For one thing, China legally nobody's allowed to own guns here. Yeah. And that's a huge difference. Yeah. And it's obviously a lot of Americans will disagree with that. They will say that is a violation of personal freedom in so many ways, not allowing someone to own a gun. But it's honestly, living in China for 6 years has really changed my idea of what exactly freedom is. You mentioned yourself, in Mexico, where unfortunately there is a lot of crime. Yeah. You don't feel safe going out after dark, very late at night. Yeah. Well, are you really free then? I mean, you're basically, like, once the sun goes down, you're basically a prisoner in your house or in your hotel. You don't feel free to move around. Mm-hmm. So how is that freedom exactly? I have some friends from South Africa. There are a lot of friends who come and work here from South Africa. Yeah. And unfortunately, South Africa also suffers from a pretty high rate of violent crime. And they will tell me that what really amazed them when they arrived in China was, oh my gosh, I can leave my house in the middle of the night. I can go to the convenience store and buy some snacks and walk back to my house, and nobody tries to rob me. It's like, they say it like it's just the most amazing thing in the world, because unfortunately many of them grew up in a place where you wouldn't dare go out after dark unless you were just asking for trouble. So that's something that a lot of my friends from like South Africa, sometimes from South America, have expressed to me.
I think China could be like one of the top 5 safest country in the world. Mm-hmm. the top safest countries like Japan, China, and South Korea, which are influenced by the Confucianism. Mm-hmm. Right? With the Confucianism, we are taught to be good people. We are taught to be nice to people. So compared to the crime rate in the Western countries, our crime rate in China is very, very low, right?
Yeah. It's a trade-off, I think. When you grow up being so concerned about those you are connected to, on the one hand, it leads to things like a much, much lower crime rate, and you feel just a lot safer in your community, because everything you do, you first think about those that you're connected to. But, on the other hand, you're constantly worried about what other people are thinking of you. So you're free to go outside in the middle of the night, but maybe you're not so free to do some other things because you're concerned about what other people will think of you if you do that thing. So it's controlling and it's also freeing at the same time. It's a trade-off, in my opinion. Yeah.
My next question is, from the perspective of foreigner, what do you think of Chinese lockdown?
Right now?
I mean, from the beginning, or it broke out?
Well, the Wenzhou, my city, first locked down in February of 2020, right about the time when Spring Festival was happening. And that's Spring Festival is the biggest holiday in China, when everybody travels to visit their hometowns. And when I came back from my Spring Festival holiday, the city was everything was shut down, everything, including, with the exception of, I think there was like 1 or 2 supermarkets that were open, and there were a few hospitals. Other than that, everything was closed, everything.
Yes.
Certain restaurants and stores were allowed to operate, but they were only allowed to do delivery.
Yeah.
That's another difference between the US and China. Everybody everybody orders their lunch through food delivery. It's, food delivery has gotten to be more of a thing recently in the US, but it's still nowhere near what it is in China. And so I was quarantined in my building for 2 weeks, actually more than 2 weeks, because I officially, when I first arrived, I was here for like a few days, and then I was instructed by my boss to take my temperature twice a day and then send him a picture of the thermometer, so that they could monitor my health. So it was tough. It was tough for everybody. And I think the hardest part of it for everyone was just the uncertainty. We were looking for answers. We were looking for answers to when can we go back to work? When can we move more freely? Because for a while there was a rule. Everyone was given like a little ID card, and every time you left your apartment building, you had to have it stamped. And the rule was 1 person per household was allowed to go out every other day, and that was it. And so we wanted to know, like, when can we move more freely? When can we do this? When can we do that? And nobody had any answers. I mean, if you had gone to the highest level of government, they wouldn't have been able to tell you, because it just depended on the numbers. It depended on when infections started to go down. It depended on when the death rate started to go down. It depended on so many things that were completely out of anybody's control. So that was the hardest thing, I think, for a lot of people to cope with. But digital communication is much more developed in China as well, I think. I mean, in America, we have WhatsApp, we have Skype, we have Zoom, we have all of these things, but they are not as integral to daily life as they are in China. So that system, that net was already there of digital communication. Everybody was connected on WeChat, which is the biggest digital communication app in China. Everybody had that connection. Everybody got their news from some WeChat group or another. So I think we had that working in our favor. We didn't know what was going on, but we were at least able to talk to each other and say, well, I heard this or I heard that, and this happened and that happened. And obviously, we obviously spread some false information at times, but having that network there, having that connection there made things a bit easier.
So my next question, the lockdown or pandemic is not only existed in China. The Western countries at the very beginning of broke out the pandemic, the Western countries also had a lockdown. So my next question is, what do you think the difference would be between lockdown in China and lockdown in Western countries?
Well, another fundamental difference, I think, between China and quote-unquote Western culture is that in East Asian society, respect for authority is actually considered a good thing. So when the pandemic first started here in China, nobody made any suggestions, nobody made any recommendations. It was like right away, get in your homes and stay there and don't come out unless the powers that be say it's okay. And it was difficult, but that was just the way it was, and everybody did the best they could with it. But I noticed in a lot of Western countries, I had a friend who was stuck in Italy at that time, and he would tell me that in the beginning, people were suggested to wear masks, recommended to not mix with others, but of course nobody paid any attention to that.
Yeah.
So finally the government said, okay, fine, shops have to be closed, everybody's got to stay in their homes, but people continued to ignore it. I heard stories about mayors of towns in Italy literally going out to the streets and yelling at people, saying, what's the matter with you? Why are you out walking your dog? Why are you out jogging with your friends? Don't you know, we're trying to prevent this pandemic. You should stay in your homes.
Right.
I mean, leadership got literally enraged because people were not paying any attention to these guidelines that were being put in place. Because, as I said, I think in Western countries, we're more conditioned to challenge and question our authority than than people are in China.
Yeah. Our Chinese people tend to be more obedient to our government, but Western people tend to be more freedom. So I have the final question. Shanghai is going on the lockdown. So whether the lockdown in Shanghai affected you?
Well, it's scary. I'm not gonna lie. It is frightening. Thankfully, it has not reached us here in Wenzhou, at least not to that extent. We did go through a period of partial lockdown. Certain businesses had to close. Certain establishments had to be closed down. But we were still allowed to go to restaurants. Schools still operated fairly normally. A select number of establishments had to be closed, but that passed after about a month, and now we're going through a period where certain places, if you want to enter, you have to show that you've gotten the vaccine. I mean, it is controlled, but we're nowhere near what Shanghai is like right now. But it is frightening. It is frightening to see what's going on there. I hear stories on WeChat all the time about people basically going insane and jumping off buildings. But I mean, who knows if they're true or not? I mean, just as in the first lockdown, lots of false information got spread around, but that's what we hear about all the time. And it is frightening, and it is, I do hear from some friends in Shanghai who are in this situation, and they're understandably frustrated. They feel that it's unreasonable what is being demanded of them. And it is hard. It's painful to watch my friends in Shanghai go through this. But at the same time, I mean, I am thankful that it hasn't gotten to me yet.
Okay, but as far as I know, that the lockdown is going to be finished probably in the in the next month of this year. After the lockdown is released, all the life, not only in Shanghai but or in the other cities will go back to normal. So which we are, which is what we expecting. Okay.
Yeah, I have heard that, for example, some of the border control is going to be relaxed a little. Someone recently came back to Wenzhou from another country, and they were quarantined for 4 weeks in a hotel, which was difficult. But when they got out, some of the other foreigners said, "Oh, wow, you're so lucky. For me, it was 5 weeks." So those controls, I've heard, are going to be lowered little by little. And I've heard, again, this is all just what I hear. It's hard to know what is real information and what isn't. That Shanghai is pretty soon is going to start scaling back their lockdown as well. And very hopefully, we're all hoping that it goes in that direction.
And everything will go back to normal. Just after a few weeks after the lockdown is released in Shanghai. So don't worry. Thanks for watching our videos. And actually, this is my first time to make videos with my friend Aliyah in China. So if you have any questions about life in China, if you have any questions about what foreigners think of China, you can leave your questions in the comment section, and we will do the second, we will do the third. Thank you, bye bye.